Hello, everyone, and welcome back down here to the Gamer's Den with me, your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. And today, I want to talk about, well, I've had trouble all day today narrowing down the subject. First, I wanted to do a DM guide and realized I was running out of very broad, generic, equally ish applicable topics that could go for game to game to game. And, well, I couldn't come up with anything. So then I thought, let's continue on with Tales from the Table. Let's do part two for the Starving Heart of Winter saga. And after something like 40 or 50 takes, I'm not in the headspace for it. Even trying to record in smaller segments and sections, I just couldn't do it. So, what are we doing today? Well, today is going to be a tableside chat on simple games versus complex games. And to emphasize that example, I wanted to compare, say, Pathfinder and Rollmaster. Rollmaster is a game that, like many others, got its start right around in the 80s or so. Uh, I don't really remember the exact timeline, but it's also stayed firmly rooted in the 80s in just terms of its sheer raw complexity. And going around online, a lot of people look at Pathfinder, Dungeons and Dragons, and the general that kind of scope of D20 games right there, and they look at the overall simplicity of it all. It's in comparison to a lot of other games, it's difficult to build the exact character that you want to build because, a fighter is a fighter and has access to this set list of skills. A mage is a mage and has these set skills. And mage gets a little bit more flexibility with the different schools and disciplines of magic and the various spells that fall underneath each of those. But still, you end up with things that look with characters that look and play pretty similar to each other. The differences come out more through role play, or at least they should. But that depends on if the table that you're at really focuses on roleplay. And some people find it very beneficial to have mechanical benefits that help to make the characters feel a bit more distinct and actually mechanically play more distinctly from one another, which is where other games that are a little bit more complex really can kind of shine because more options mean that you can have a character that is mechanically effective but also mechanically distinct. Their relative effectiveness within those games may vary somewhat, but you tend to get more variation as well as viability from that variation. Although, just as a side note, casters, regardless of game, tend to be pretty goddamn overpowered. It's true in Pathfinder, and it's definitely true in Rollmaster. Although I will say Rollmaster does have a caveat to that, and we'll get to that in a moment. But just to emphasize what I'm talking about here, if you're a new gamer looking at this, especially if you got your start in, say, something like 5th edition, which definitely simplified down a lot of things and condensed down a lot, this may appear a little bit more complex than what you're used to. This is just your standard Pathfinder character sheet. You've got your stats here, your hit points, your speed and skills, your armor class and initiative, your saves, combat maneuver bonus and defense, and then your weapons. And on your back, you have, spells, feats, special abilities, gear, and your specific armor. I mean, that seems like a lot to take in, but it's, fairly simple. And once you kind of get the hang of this, a couple of play sessions in, and this will feel pretty familiar and pretty comfortable. It looks like a lot, but really it's not. Especially when you compare it to Rollmaster. Now, for Rollmaster, I'm going to leave aside the extra sheets that I have, the optional sheets. I'm just going to go with the specific character sheet right now. So that's, gosh, about 6 pages right there. Now, normally this would be a front and back thing, but the way things work sometimes. This is your standard Rollmaster character sheet. This is just the front. You have Pathfinder, you have 6 statistics. You have strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, and charisma. It's pretty standard for Dungeons and Dragons, 3rd edition, 4th edition, 5th edition. But for Rollmaster, you have 10 statistics. They also give you a handy section here for commonly used skills, so you don't have to go flipping through pages. Commonly used attacks, commonly used equipment, all very handy. But whereas with Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons, well, prior to 5th edition, you have 3 saves, Constitution, Reflex, and Will. And in 5th edition, you just have your various statistical saves. You have Strength save, Dex save, Con, etc. You get the idea. For Rollmaster, you have your resistance rolls. You have things like channeling, essence, mentalism, poison and disease, and fear. You also have to keep track of soul departure. What's soul departure, you ask? Well, once you hit 0 hit points or less, pretty sure it's less, you have a certain number of rounds before your soul completely departs the mortal plane for the afterlife. For humans, that's 12. For halflings, it's something like 20. Elves get like 2 or 3 because they're so much closer to the divine and the afterlife that their soul just up sticks and leaves pretty damn fast. And that's just the front page. You also have their skill categories. What's a skill category? Well, just to simplify things, down here is weapon skills. You have one-handed concussion, one-handed edge, two-handed, missile artillery, polearms, and thrown weapons. So that's just the general categories. Then you have the specific skills, which you just kind of write in. In this case, one-handed weapon longsword, one-handed weapon falchion, both of which go underneath the skill category, and they operate from the one-handed edged weapon skill category, which gives you, your base. Then you add in your specific skill on top of it. Then you add in your statistics on top of it, and whatever miscellaneous bonuses that you might have. That's way more complicated than Pathfinder and Dungeons and Dragons. Oh my god, I don't want to mix these up. And then after that, you have your equipment and all of that. So way more complicated. And bear in mind, this character's a warrior. This character doesn't deal, well, he does have some magic, but that's a pretty involved story right there. We'll maybe talk about that another time. But he's not a character that is specifically built around magic. He's not a wizard, he's not a cleric or anything like that. Being a caster, you have to decide what kind of caster you're going to be. Are you going to be a mentalist, working with like a psychic magic? Well, basically magic born out of your mind. Are you a channeler? Do you just channel forces from the channel magical forces from the divine powers or larger sources of power? Or are you an essence user? Essence users basically think like a magical filter. Their bodies just naturally collect more magic, and thus they're able to use more magic. And then, then you have hybrid casters, which are usually a mix of one of those three, or all of them, and on and on and on. And then you have different kinds of essence magic users, different kinds of channeling magic users, different kinds of mentalism magic users. I think there's something like 80, 90 different specific schools of magic, and not even schools, just different specific arts. Take healing, for example. Healing, you have bone law. Bone law is basically the specific set of magical spells or magical discipline focused on healing and restoring bones. Then you have blood ways. Then you have organ ways, or maybe it's organ law. Either way. You also have nerve law. So in order to properly heal someone using magic, say somebody gets an arm cut off, you need to know bone law, blood ways, or nerve law, and on and on and on. You need to have like 3 or 4 different schools of magic to restore somebody's arm. Oh, concussions ways is another one, which is just kind of like your generic healing, generic damage-ish kind of thing. honestly, there's so many that it kind of gets confusing, and you can see how much more complicated things get. And to top it off, this is a game where you develop your skills using skill points. Well, how do you calculate your skill points? You have to add in, or you have to take the total of. Okay, this is where you can see how this is getting much more complicated because I'm looking at all the steps for calculating this. For your stats, you have your temporary stats and your potential stats. What that means is potential is what your maximum is. Temporary is what you're actually at. And then, of course, you have basic bonus, racial bonus, special bonus, on and on. But you add together your temporary stats for agility, constitution, memory, reasoning, and self-discipline. You take those totals, add them all together, and then divide by 5. That's your total number of skill points. Skill points can be spent on your skills, or you can buy training packages that typically have bonuses to different skills. And you also need those points if you're a spellcaster. You need to use those points and invest them into your different disciplines of magic. And how many? And then you have open lists for magic, closed lists, and God, you could see how much more complicated this is getting. You can build a very specific character in this game, but you have hundreds upon hundreds of options, and there's so much math. Basically, when I first made this character, first made this warrior, the DM gave me 2 choices. And he recommended that we go with the spreadsheet, which is basically just an auto calculator for putting the character together. And I was thinking to myself, no, let's just build this by hand. Let's just go through the books and build this by hand because I'd really like to do that. I'd really like to have that experience. Our first session was 4 hours of us going through about 2 or 3 different books through about a range of about 100 pages in each of them, looking up the things we needed to put this character together. And this was, again, a warrior. Sword and board, pretty basic as far as, things go. And I love my warriors. And I built a damn good one in this case. But it took 4 hours because neither of us had an idea of what we were doing for this. And we didn't know where to look. So we had to dig and look through the reference materials. And yeah, we needed reference materials to put this character together. I'm at the point now where I could probably build a new character in, about a half an hour. If I'm helping somebody build a character, it's probably going to take about an hour or so because, well, I want to build their character, so I'm going to ask them and talk to them and explain to them my thinking, get their thoughts, feedback, and input, because I want to build them. I want to help them build their character. And the reason why I'm doing it instead of them is because I'm that weirdo that has the patience to go through about 4 hours worth of research to put together a character, but still somehow struggle to remember my social security number sometimes. The shame. And I want my friends to play with me in this game, and, well, they won't if it's going to take them 4 hours to put together one character. And really, who could blame them? I certainly wouldn't, so I do it. I also level up their characters because in our group we alternate DMs, and so usually I'm DMing, but sometimes my friend will DM, and he'll run this game, and so most everybody will not remember how to level up their characters between the months or so. And with COVID, that's just been exacerbated, so on and on and on. So, complexity can offer you the ability to build exactly the character you want. Simplicity will be much faster, much easier to get into, and just go boom, 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 pick up and play, ready to go, not have to worry about a damn thing regarding that. But again, it is because it's simpler, the trade-off is you're going to be a bit more factory standard. Interchangeable parts. A fighter will be a fighter. Typically high strength or high dexterity, depending on what exactly your build is. And, two-handed weapons really capitalize well on a high strength, whether that's a great sword or a pole arm of some kind. So that's going to be pretty typical there. But the differences will come out in roleplay, but there won't be much mechanical variation between the characters, between two fighters, between two, on and on and on. Unless you're specific, assuming that you're building entirely for mechanical effectiveness. But, that introduces a whole host of problems right there. Versus a game that's more complex, again, you build the character that you exactly want. But that comes with the caveat of it's going to take a while. And other games like Shadowrun is definitely a bit more complex than than Pathfinder or Fifth Edition, but it's not nearly so complex as that Rollmaster business. Let's see, can I find the character? Here we go. And really, it's not super complex. It's mostly just different, but there are some things that are a little bit more complicated. You have more attributes, you have a wider range of skills, and then you have specializations. And then, of course, mages are more complex. Physical adepts are a bit more complex. And then you have, all the cybernetic upgrades that factor in. You have the rules for explosions, which are unnecessarily complicated. I get that they were going for a level of realism there, and, it's meant to emphasize the greater level of tactical planning that can be had in Shadowrun. But, there's some things that just don't work out too well. There's a lot there that could be faster and better. And I'm not trying to shit on anybody's favorite game. I'm just saying that there's a give and take with different things and with different game systems and rules. And there's a trade-off to be had in emphasizing one thing over another. There's no perfect game out there. Really, what it's going to all boil down to is, are you having fun? That's the most important question right there, is are you having fun? And for me, I have fun with all three of these games. I have fun with most games that I come across. Fourth edition Dungeons and Dragons, not so much, but that's a whole nother story, which, we can dive into later. Actually, better yet, I'm just going to link to a Puff and Forest video on fourth edition. Does a much better job than I probably ever could, but that's because he played that game a lot. I played about 3 times and said, screw it, I'm done with this mess. Not out of any edition wars nonsense, it's just that it was just not fun. You think Pathfinder and 3rd edition could get really cookie cutter. Holy shit, 4th edition took that to a whole nother level and slowed combat down. And no multi-classing, I mean, bleh. Anyways, with all that said, is simplicity better? Is complexity better? It really just depends, and ultimately will come back down to what I said earlier. Are you having fun? If the answer is yes, then simplicity's worth it. Then the complexity's worth it. If you're not, well, house rule it and fix it and make it better for yourself, or play a different game. Maybe the game's not for you. Doesn't say anything bad about you. Don't listen to what the trolly, angry types are who just want to be a prick for whatever reason, whatever perceived slight. Ignore them. Go and have fun. That's why we're all here. That's what we want to do with these games ultimately, is have fun. But with that said, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. If you had fun and enjoyed today's video, well, hell, go on down there and let me know in the comments section. Click that like button. And if you've been having fun, maybe you will find these videos popping up over here somewhere fun as well. Maybe you'll find them enjoyable, informative, whatever. Go over and click those and go have a look. And if you've been enjoying content here overall, then hell, why not consider subscribing to the channel? We'd certainly be happy to have you here. I know I would love to have you here and engage in discussion with you all. But once again, I've been your host, Jordan, your master of lore and storyteller extraordinaire. Thank you all so much for your time, and you all have yourselves a good night.